Next up, we have Dr. Christian Kahl, who is like user experience lead for CyberSolutions, talking about future user experience, designing dynamic experiences with AI-driven design. And we are looking forward to hearing about the future of user experience by using data-driven artificial intelligence solutions in order to maximize user experience.
Hello and welcome. My name is Christian Kahl and I'm happy to be here at the e-commerce Berlin Virtual Edition. And I'm happy that you are here for the future of UX, creating dynamic user experiences with AI-driven design. But before we get deeper into this topic and before I tell you more about what this is about, let's start with some first brief words about myself. So who I am, what I do and why I'm here. Well, actually, I was always fascinated and accompanied by digital technologies and by innovation. Especially, I worked in a startup context where this, of course, played an important role as a researcher in an academic context, as well as now working in the field of user experience. And not least, also as a techno DJ, who I am as well, technologies and especially innovation play an important role because this field is constantly affected by technological progress. And yeah, I'm working for CyberSolutions right now in the field of user experience, innovation, and of course this also has a lot to do with AI, with technologies, with conversational commerce, personalization and things like that. So when we are talking about user experiences, the first question is, how will future user experiences actually look like when it's about the future of UX? Will this rather be like the classical in-store experience or online experience where we have a lot of choice, a lot of different products, a broad selection? Will this be some defined place where we go to shop products, or will this be rather integrated in our daily life, in our environments, or will this be maybe even completely virtual? Well, and as Abraham Lincoln once said, the best way to predict your future is actually to create it. And this is what this presentation is mainly about. How can we actually create future user experiences? But let's first start with the term of a user experience itself. If we take this example, what you can see here, a classical supermarket setting where you have a lot of different products, where you have a lot of different shelves, and you have this user here going through this supermarket. Of course, this user would have different touch points. He or she would be attracted by some products, would stop by at one or the other point, would maybe remain there for some more time at the one point or the other point, would add some things to the basket and so on, and would browse his or her way through this store. So when we are talking about user experiences, we are, just as in this example, we talk about experiences along user journeys. We look at touch points, as I said, interactions, perceptions, emotions, and all of these different aspects along this user journey, in this case, in the supermarket. The goal in this case is always for us as experts, UX experts, designers, decision makers, or whoever in e-commerce, the goal is always to improve experiences along touch points and journeys. And what improving means is basically to optimize these experiences along the journeys by optimizing different aspects, like optimizing the ways of interaction, the functionalities, the design, the usability, all of this. So this is basically where we are, and matters when we are talking about user experiences. When we go to the online context and the e-commerce context, it looks pretty much similar. We have a store here where somebody is starting on the home page. basically, and then clicking its way through, for example, in this case, to the gaming category, and then going to a selection of gaming notebooks in this case, browsing around a bit, checking the details, and then diving deeper into the product and the available products basically, and the technical details, for example, the details regarding delivery, regarding prices, and so on. So these are the different touch points in the e-commerce context here as well. And if we talk about user journeys, then we have to consider, and that's the first really important point here, that every user journey in e-commerce is different. So this, what we just saw, was one example, but we have a lot more, and journeys are diverse and they are changing based on the goals, based on the behaviors, the touch points, and the devices users have. And of course, also based on the context. And to make this a bit more clear, I've taken this example here. This is Lara, she's 24, and she is a gamer. And she says, well, I want to play games with my friends. That's the goal for her right now. Maybe it's, just the weekend is ahead and she wants to play games with her friends. That's the goal. But at the moment, she doesn't have a proper system for playing the current up-to-date games. So she needs to check which system is the best for me, and then goes to the online store, for example, diving deeper into this topic, just as we saw it before. Maybe finding out that the best gaming system is not a console, but it's a gaming notebook, in fact, in this case, and diving deeper into this topic, as we saw before. And then maybe in this case, she says, well, they also have it in the store. A store is quite close to me, so why not checking it there and maybe getting it today? So maybe just buying there the right gaming notebook, and then I can play with my friends online, for example, or at home. So this is just one example or one other example of a user journey in this case, but if we stick with this example for a moment and change just some of the elements, we see that a journey can be completely different in this context. So the goal, and we still have the user Lara here, who is 24, the goal is still the same. She wants to play games with her friends and wants to get some inspiration, in this case while she's traveling. She's just on her way to work or back from the university, and she just has some spare time and wants to check which games are out there. And then she goes to maybe Twitch or YouTube at first to check what people play these days, and then she eventually comes back to one or multiple stores to check which games they have on offer, for example. And then, well, she says, well, it's just about time and I'm almost at home, but the store, in this case, for example, is on my way. So I can just try some games there. I can check them there. I can just try out how it feels. And as you can see in these two simple examples, just changing some of these touch points and the goals and behaviors creates completely different journeys. So we still have the store here as a main touch point. We have the online shop here as a touch point, but we have different behaviors, different goals, different intentions, and that makes a completely different journey in this context. So as you can see, context matters a lot, and e-commerce experiences, in fact, as you saw in these examples, need to be as dynamic and individual as user journeys are, just like the journeys we saw. So that means for us, we are in the e-commerce field, it means to provide products and services which are needed by the user in the current context, or as needed in the current context. So based on the current needs and goals, based on the current time, location, and all of these contextual aspects that matter. So that also means for us that e-commerce platforms need to enable this flexibility, basically. But how can they actually do this? How can we actually provide experiences that enable this flexibility? Because as we have it right now, e-commerce stores have a large selection of products. They are focused more on the search, find, buy paradigm, so offering products, guiding users more or less to the right products, and then enabling them to buy these products. And, well, personalization is of course in place. It's not a new topic. Online shops use that, but it's still, I would say, quite limited. And yeah, just some examples that show or illustrate these aspects, no matter if it's in the fashion context or in the digital goods and music context here, for example, or if it's more like a marketplace with a lot of different products. You always have this large selection of products, you always have this focus, and you always have more or less single items or single elements on such e-commerce shops which are personalized, but it's yeah, it's very limited to specific spots in these shops. So how can we actually get there? How to solve this problem and how to address individual user journeys, and yeah, not least, how to create dynamic and exciting user experiences? Well, let's take the example that we have here on the left with the building blocks. So you have a field of a lot of different building blocks, as you can see here in this example. And these building blocks, of course, enable you to build different things. But if you want to build something out of these blocks, you at first need to know what you actually want to build. So you need some insights and you need some plan and some goals, what you would like to achieve in the end. So that's the really first step in here. And then, of course, you build single solutions. So you build, for example, in this case, a window or certain parts of a building, in this case. And yeah, thereby, stepwise, you build an experience in the end. So you have the complete building, like the windmill here in this example, but it could, of course, also be something completely different. You could use these building blocks, if we just go back, to complete something very different, to yeah, achieve a completely different goal. So, and this is how it looks like, yeah, as a process, basically. And the question for us is, of course, how can we apply this principle and what does this actually mean for the online context? And this is what I will tell you right now. So again, first of all, it's very important to gather insight. That sounds pretty trivial and that sounds like, well, I know that, but it's an essential first step and it's more complex than it actually sounds like in the first place. So gathering insights basically means to identify needs about users and their current context. So it's not about the preferences of a specific user or of a group of users, which apply more or less generally, but it's more about identifying insights and needs for a given situation and a given context, and yeah, most probably in real time. So gathering these insights is the very first step, and then, of course, just as in the building blocks example that we had before, it's about creating solutions. It's about making the building blocks which address specific needs. Like, for example, we have here different collections of or curations of banners, maybe a product finder, maybe some different representations of product offers, and so on. So these are the solutions, just like the window in the example we had before. And then it's about delivering experiences. So basically designing combinations of building blocks which provide a certain value to the user. Yeah, these are basically the three important steps, just like in the building blocks example before. So gather insights, create solutions, and then based on these solutions, deliver experiences. So before we get a step further to make this more concrete, I would like to show you these examples. And maybe you're asking yourself, you're wondering, what does this actually mean? What does this have to do with the presentation? I will tell you right now. We see a CV, a classical one. We see some rental advertisement here. We see some pictures of art, very classic ones. We see a lot of cats and cat content. And we see some people there. And what do all of these examples have in common? Well, nothing of this is real. Everything here you can see is created by artificial intelligence-based systems. And not least, also our user, Lara, that we had before, you remember, she was also not real. She is not real. She is an AI-generated picture I just used for this presentation, and I just generated for this presentation. So what does this mean? Well, it basically means that we have a lot of possibilities today, even today, with AI-based tools and systems and with AI-based technologies. So the main question for us now is if AI-based tools and technologies can do all of this, what we just saw before, they can of course also help us in executing, assisting and automating the steps we saw before to deliver dynamic and individual user experiences. So how does this look like if we make it more concrete? Because that's of course what you want to know, right? In terms of the insights, and that's again the first step, AI-based tools. And it's important to talk about AI-based tools, in fact, here, not about AI, because it's such a broad and often not really exactly defined term, but these are tools which use artificial intelligence in some or the other way, or something related to artificial intelligence to basically help us to automate things, to assist us and to execute things. And when we go to the first aspect of insights that I mentioned before, these tools can of course help us to aggregate sources, to recognize patterns and to personalize findings, for example, for different groups of internal stakeholders. That's the first important part in order to really identify these real-time insights, as I would say. And then the second part is the solutions part, where these tools can provide inspiration, for example, when it comes to, for example, designing experiences, designing interfaces, for example, then enabling the creation when it comes to designing actual banners, for example, or making designs, in fact, and assist in implementation when it comes to coding actual parts for a web shop, coding functionalities and implementing things. And this is also where AI-based tools can, of course, support developers, for example. The third part is, of course, the experiences part, where these tools can enable the curation of experiences based on these different solutions, where they can help us scale personalization so that we can provide the most individual experiences for a large group of users, basically, of customers. And then, of course, they can also help us to test variations. So what serves best for a specific type of user in a specific context, in a specific situation. And of course, all of this helps to address these three different steps. So this already makes it a bit more concrete, but it will get even more concrete in the next step. Because the question, of course, now is how to create unique and exciting experiences by actually using these tools. So is it just getting the right tools and then applying them in my online shop and then I'm done, I'm good to go? Well, it's not as simple as that, as you can imagine. But I will tell you more about how this can work out for you and how this can work out in a general e-commerce context. And this gets me basically to the big picture, probably the part you've been waiting for. We see here again example of an online shop, and the first part is of course the insights part, as I mentioned before. There you can of course gather quantitative insights based on the respective tools, and also it's important not to forget the qualitative aspects part. There are also tools for that, but it's also important to highlight here that the human element shouldn't be forgotten, and shouldn't be forgotten here. That it's still important, of course, very important to talk with users, to involve users in the product development, for example, and to really take into account their feedback and their insights. So the whole insights part is of course something that you continuously generate data, quantitative and qualitative data. You enrich this with actual real human user feedback, and you combine this data and you have a lot of, you have a basis of insights that you can use in the next step. And then the part of building solutions, of course, becomes important, where you can have different tools, for example, for generating banners, based on the database of products that you have, for building content, in fact, like product descriptions, for example, also based on product data, and maybe addressed to different types of customers. So depending, for example, on how deep they would like to dive into the product details, so you can have different types of descriptions. And of course, it gets more complex when it comes to like live shopping or digital assistants like chatbot and voice skills. But that, of course, is also an important part nowadays. And these are, of course, just examples how you can actually build these solutions, these things like we had in the building blocks example before, that serve a certain clearly defined purpose that can be used in a very versatile way. And of course, we have the third part, the experiences part, where all of this comes together. So it's more about curation here. It can be, for example, conversational search. It can be recommendation engines that you use here for products, but also for content, like banners, for example, and like also text content. It can be product finders, or generally speaking, guided selling. And it can be more general conversational assistance, for example. And of course, as I mentioned before, in this step also no-code development tools or design tools come into play, as well as tools for example, automated testing to really continuously evolve your setup and your experiences. So this is, as I mentioned, the big picture. This is how it all comes together. And how you can systematically use different types of tools in combination together in order to provide personalized and very individual dynamic user experiences. Of course, all of this is more or less just scratching the surface. And of course, it depends very much on your specific context, but this gives you an impression how this can look like and where you have to go, and how you can also achieve that these tools do not stand isolated of each other, but work in a joint way. So, and this is how what you can actually call a digital experience architecture, because it's about the elements and about the systematic application of them. So, and this already brings me to a kind of summary. So what matters most? What are the key takeaways for you? And if we are coming back to the first question, what are the future user experiences? How do they look like? The question was, of course, how can we actually create them, if we stick with Abraham Lincoln here for a moment? And of course, it means that these experiences have to be individual. They have to be even more context-based in the future. And that also means that they have to be flexible. So these are three very important aspects that you should keep in mind. And of course, it means that they need to be AI and data-driven, because that's basically that's the foundation for all of this. And how can we create them? And that's the next important question that we were concerned about in this presentation and that I talked about. Well, the first aspect here is learn systematically and continuously. So it's not only about generating insights, but it's about really applying these insights systematically, building up on them, and then getting better and better, and delivering better and better experiences, in fact. And when it comes to create experiences, it's very much about designing journeys. So as I said before, it's not only about applying tools or using tools in a certain context, but it's really about what kind of journeys do I want to actually design, and how can I actually excite users along these journeys. These are the main questions here. And that also means, as I mentioned, to utilize tools with a clear purpose, with a clear goal, and with a clear focus on your specific users. Because, as I said, this is a very generic view on all of this, but it depends very much on the context you are in, on the type of business, on the kind of shop that you have, and on the users that you serve. And as I mentioned as well, don't forget the human element. That's also important. So still talk with users, involve them, and just let them help you, basically. And just one last aspect, what's next? First point here, to look a bit into the future, the aspect of liquid expectations. So expectations will rise based on better user experiences people have in or from other contexts. The best experiences will always serve as a reference, basically, and they will also this reference will also check or will also affect the experiences in your context and how they perceive it in your context. And then predictive experiences is another field, so it will get more and more into this direction that you will have to predict, or at least presume, what users will expect and what kind of products they would like to have, what they are interested in, and so on. So more on a predictive basis, so that you have to foresee more what's coming up in the future. And of course, immersion will also play a part. So e-commerce gets more and more integrated in our environments, and this also plays an important role with smart devices, for example, and so on. And new touch points, as I mentioned, with all of these smart devices, with basically also a lot of different devices where internet is integrated in, which are capable of providing user experiences. A lot of new touch points will become relevant, just like voice assistants already became relevant in the last years. That's also something where e-commerce has to adapt to, but we will also have further new touch points in the future, of course. And that's it. With this look to the future, I will close my presentation for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the attention, and I wish you a good day, and enjoy the other presentations here at the conference, and hope to see you sometime in the future also in real life again. So have a good one, and thank you. Bye-bye. Well, we can combine, of course, general insights with context-based analytics. That's the answer in one sentence, I would say. So what does this mean? Well, in general, what are the typical journeys of your users, of the users and customers of your web shop, for example? How do they use certain touch points and devices, and what kind of goals do they have associated with this touch points and devices, and what kind of behaviors are typical for them? That's something you need to basically find out. And that again can be a combination, if you want to find that out, it can be a combination of quantitative analytics, as I mentioned before, but also qualitative research, for example, like user interviews and so on, like really talking with users, interacting with them, and learning more about their behaviors and why it's like that in a certain context, and simply also observing the behavior in real contexts. And then context, that's actually the second part. So the first part is general, is general insights and analytics, but of course you need to have real-time analytics as well to really identify the goals, the behaviors, and the patterns in a given context. So as we saw in the journey before with Lara, our user, it can be quite different depending on the situation, depending on the device, and so on. And all of this plays a role, and you have to find out as much as possible, basically, and also know how this can be used, basically, to provide experiences. But that's, I would say, that's the answer, to combine general and context-based insights and then provide the respective building blocks and adapt the experiences. You always have to ask yourself, I would say, what value does a building block and a solution and an experience in the end actually provide? I think that's the first main question here. Like if we stick with the example that I had with the Lego building blocks, for example, the window in this example provided a clear value. Serves some clear purpose, but it can be used in a very different way in different buildings, for example. And that's, if you transfer this this example to the online world, it's quite similar, in fact. So for example, if we take a carousel with products, with 4 products, for example, and a very specific design, this carousel can, of course, provide value for highlighting and for curating products, so for showing a specific selection of products. That's the general value it can provide, but it can be used in different experiences in a different way. So it can be combined with banners and an embedded video, for example, on a more inspirational page in one experience, but it can also be used for guiding users to concrete products in another context, for example, providing personalized recommendations based on purchase and returns of a user. So the element and the solution here, like the product carousel, is still the same, but it can be used in a quite different way. And that's how it can provide value. Yes, well, it's rather the other way around, I would say. It's rather the question how to utilize tools and solutions with a holistic purpose and in a systematic way, because that's, in fact, what an architecture is about. So the first questions that I have to ask myself is, of course, which goals do I have? What kind of experiences do I want to serve and provide, and how? And which elements do I actually need to achieve this, and how do I need to combine them? Just again with the building blocks and solutions and experiences that I built. So it doesn't matter so much if the solutions itself, like for example some tool for recommendations, are bought or if they are rather self-built. The important thing is what kind of purpose do they serve in your architecture and in your whole setting, basically. And that also, of course, means that you can flexibly combine bought tools with self-built tools, for example. But the main thing is what kind of elements do I need and what purpose do they serve in a systematic way. Yeah, indeed. As I said, actually, e-commerce gets more and more integrated in our daily life, in our environments. For example, with the smart devices that I mentioned, and it will be even more integrated and even more part of our lives in the future, with more and more integrations and more touch points. So my recommendation here would be to focus on what matters most for your users and your customers. That's something you have to find out. So which touch points and devices do they use mostly, and why and how, and also of course how this changes along time, for example, because technology is progressing in a very fast way. So you have to stay up to date. You have to keep that in mind. You have to adapt as fast as your users do, basically, and your customers do. But that also means, on the other hand, that you don't need to serve all different touch points, all different devices which are out there. It's rather choosing the right ones and serving them in a smart way and integrating them with smart experiences, I would say, and providing these experiences for your users. But it's more about focusing, I would say. It's not so much about serving it all. Of course, usually I have more insights about registered users. That's, of course, the first main difference. Often I also have a longer relationship with them. So that also means that I can create more individual experiences, in fact, because I learned more about them. I know what they purchased in the past, for example. I know, or I might know at least, what their preferences are and so on. So this is, of course, some key asset and some key value of registered users in the first place. And the important question from my point of view here is to ask yourself, what can convince my users to register? So to make the value clear, to provide some benefits, for example, for registration and so on. But of course, it's not only about registered users. Still, real-time insights matter, as I mentioned, and that was, of course, one of the most important parts in my presentation. So even if a user is registered, these are more general preferences. But what also matters is the actual preferences in a given context, as I said. So what does this user in this specific context want to achieve, with what kind of device, at what kind of touch point, and what's the best way and the best experiences that would serve this user right now. And that can be quite different from general preferences, for example, and general insights I have about a user, no matter if it's a registered one or if it's a new customer.